Like Mother's Day, Father's Day provides an opportunity to celebrate how God relates to us in a way similar to how a father should relate to us. And I say should because there are no perfect fathers. But if you line up fathers and hear stories about those fathers, after a while, you get a pretty good idea about what a father should look like, how a father should act, things a father should say, and so forth. As a matter of fact, a few weeks ago at an email blast, and have I noted that if you have not given us your email address, give it to us so you can receive email blasts and etc. That was another advertisement. In an email blast I sent out, I invited you to give me a story or two of your father, favorite memory of some sort. I was overwhelmed by the response. I received 11 pages of single-spaced copy of stories that you have, memories you have of your father. I'm going to read every word on every page today. Get ready. No, but if I did, you would find it very interesting. Fascinating stories. I took notes. I summarized them. You talked about fathers being both disciplinarian but also playful. You talked about them being strong but also tender. You talked about them working hard but at the same time devoting themselves to their families no matter how tired they were. You talked about them being manly men. At the same time, you talked about them being people with a sentimental or a soft side. The stories you told, though varied, have one thing in common. They reflect a special relationship you had. And that special relationship touched your life and shaped your character for years to come. So I'm wondering, if I had Jesus' email address, and if I had asked him in my email blast to submit a story or two about his father, his Abba, as he called him, I wonder how he would have responded. My hunch is that he would have said that his father, first and foremost, is powerful, is strong. Actually, that's what many of you said. Several of you talked about how much you admired your fathers, feeling like they could do just about anything. Some talked about how their dads were so brave, courageous in the military, serving in the war, in various wars. Some talked about feeling distant from their dads at times because of the authority with which the dad seemed to carry himself. Some talked about how skillfully their dads could maneuver barges or tractor trailers or station wagons, even with 5 kids yelling from the back seat, I guess. Some talked about how they thought their dads could build anything and fix anything. My children will never remember that about me. But Jesus could really relate to what you wrote about the powerfulness of your dads. He would have probably sent back an email saying, yeah, you know what my dad did and does? He takes matter and compresses matter, and some he forms into planets and asteroids and comets and stars, and he flings them throughout the cosmos, spinning them into infinity. And my dad is the master of the quarks and the pulsars and the black holes and the wormholes. My dad is the one who shields the earth with this layer of oxygen, of atmosphere. And my dad at the same time, with his right arm, controls the storehouses of wind and rain and can even put wisdom in the microscopic caterpillar's brain. That's what my dad can do. And Jesus would go on to say, and I've been privileged to be able to be the magnifying glass of my Father's power. He said in today's passage, believe me because of the works I do. I tell you, the one who believes in me will do greater works than these because I am going to the Father. Now, I think it might be interesting to note, at least in my opinion, Jesus never did miracles. Never did. He was so close to the Father, though, that the Father gladly did miracles through him. And I think that's an important distinction. It was through the Father that thousands were fed with fish. It was through the Father that a grieving parent's wish came true. It was through the Father that water turned to wine. It was through the Father that gave sight to the blind. It was through the Father, because Jesus was so close, that the one event that grounded and formed Christianity came about. Jesus did not raise himself, but God the Father intervened, pushed back natural laws, flicked aside the stone in front of the tomb as if it were a pebble, and said, "My son, come forth." We are here only because of God the Father's strong right arm. Never ever think that our God is some unmoved mover, some clockmaker that winds things up and just roams away. No, our God is living, breathing, active, and strong, because that is how Jesus said he was, and he proved it through those works. So yes, I think the first thing God or Jesus would say about his Father is the first thing that many of you said: strong. And I think the second thing he would say is that this Father is an amazing provider. You told stories of dads who worked long hours to provide for their families. You told stories of dads who were truck drivers, soldiers, professional folk, business owners, salesmen, and machinists. What they all had in common was their willingness to work tirelessly, enduring lots of strains and stresses in order to buy clothes, school supplies, pay the mortgage, and put food on the table. Your stories told of how your dads also provided insight and advice, instruction and wisdom. The men you wrote about taught you about nature, the beauty of flowers and trees and streams, and how you should respect them. They taught you to love your country. They taught you to play sports. They taught you practical things like tying a clover hitch knot and cleaning a fish. They taught you music and dancing. They taught you how to live by the examples they set, such as the importance of being willing to sacrifice for people you're committed to, and for a cause you believe in. And Jesus can relate to those stories, because Jesus is the one who said, "Friends, my Father cares for the birds of the air, the lilies of the field. My Father knows when a sparrow falls. And if my Father knows that, how much more does he know what's going on in your life? He knows even the number of hairs on your head. He knows what you need before you even ask. He just wants you to ask. And he's in the closet that you can go into, and when you pray, he's there waiting to hear." And what's more, Jesus said, his Father provides, our Father provides, in a very unusual way. He said in today's scripture, "In my Father's house, there are many rooms." And the Greek word for room literally means a resting place. A place free from strain, from stress, from worry, from fear. I would venture to say that most of us here, if we remembered early enough in our childhood, we could remember a room that we called ours and how big it was. And hopefully it was a place where you could feel secure. Provided in this room are things just for you from someone who loves you. And you knew you were safe because that someone who loves you was just outside that door, in that other room, always looking out after you. This is what Jesus says the Father provides for you. For you who love this Father with all your heart and seek after him with everything you got, remember, you have a reservation for that room because God the Father provides. So if Jesus had my email, he would have said that God is powerful, that his dad is also a provider. First and foremost, really, bottom line, God is the one who ultimately is loving and amazingly forgiving. Many of you talked about the concrete ways your dad would express love. One dad, serving in World War II, would send a stick of gum to his daughter in a letter with drawings and notes of love to her. She has well over 50 of these wrappers and treasures them to this day. And interestingly enough, I just received one of them before this service. Wrigley's Spearmint Gum. Chewing aids teeth. Chew after every meal. Advertising is interesting, isn't it? But more importantly is what's scribbled on this wrapper. How are daddies sweethearts? I love you. Kiss mommy for daddy. Love of a father. And I love this story told by one woman in this congregation. In a small town in Iowa, my dad took presents in the middle of the night to families he knew would not have a Christmas. He owned a hardware store that had lots of toys. One particular freezing night in the 1940s, when I went with him, was the experience that shaped my life. We drove in his truck through the town with no headlights and left such things as bikes, sleds, dolls on their doorstep, rang the doorbell, and fled to the closest tree to hide and watch. When the lights came on and the door opened slowly and the children screamed in delight, I had frozen tears of joy I have not since seen. I have chills writing this, and it is 75 degrees in my home. I am 80 years old now, and I remember this as if it was yesterday. Such a demonstration of love would make you remember, wouldn't it? For me, I remember most especially my dad being forgiving. Now, being raised on the country, on a farm in southeast Missouri, I had chores to do as a teenager. One of the chores that I approached with the joy with which I would go to a dentist who did not believe in Novocaine was taking this weed whacker and whacking weeds. That's what you do with a weed whacker. How many weeds can a weed whacker whack if okay. And so my job was to dutifully whack the weeds and the underbrush around the house, behind the house, down toward the little lake we had on the farm. And I remember one evening, Dad came home, said, "Greggy, I just planted silver poplar saplings alongside both sides of the driveway, and I want to see them grow up. They will make a nice, beautiful border for our driveway, for our home." That's what my dad said to me. I, as a 15-year-old, heard Dad say, "Greggy," and that was it. So 2 days later, going around, whacking my weeds, underbrush, I come up to the driveway and I note, look, there are some weeds in a straight line. Isn't that interesting? So I took them out, left nothing more than an inch, if that. Dad came home. He was strangely silent at first, and he looked at me and said, "Greggy, yeah, did you cut down my silver poplars?" "No. I cut down some strange weeds by the driveway, but Dad, I would never cut down your silver poplars." He didn't say a word, and you knew what he was thinking. That, my friends, is grace. When you knew what you want to say, but you don't. And what was it that Jesus said? "Whoever has seen me has seen the Father. You look into Jesus' face, and you see eyes that would grow big whenever he would see the helpless and the hopeless, the grieving, the sick. You look into his face, and you would see lips that would whisper, Father, forgive them, even as they are hammering nails into his hands and feet. You would look into his face, and you would remember that he would tell the story of his father being that doting dad on the porch, looking down the road down which that rebellious teenage son of his had gone, always looking down, hoping that the son would return. You see, friends, this is the cornerstone, really, of our faith. Other religions may say that God is compassionate, and that's good. And we believe God is compassionate, not winking at sin, but that God is compassionate. But we take it a step farther and say, our God is the Father who delights in putting toys on our porch, ringing the doorbell, and hiding behind the tree with expectancy. Our Father is the one who has all these things he would want to say to us that we deserve to hear, but he doesn't. Our Father is the one who loves us so much that he would not even hold back his Son from us, so that in seeing him, we would see the Father. Yes, Jesus would say that Dad is powerful, Dad is a provider, but he would linger for a long time, in telling us how very loving and forgiving Abba, Daddy, is. Now, I know that we all have varying experiences with our fathers. All dads make mistakes parenting. Just ask my kids. Don't ask my kids. You know, they know. But there is no mistaking the very clear picture that Jesus paints of the one he knows so well, the one he loves so intimately, the one he calls Dad. Kurt Warner, the patron saint of the Rams, a few years ago was signing autographs, and after his name, he would sign MVP. One of his young sons noted that and asked what the initial stood for. Kurt, with pride, well, it means that I was the most valuable player in the National Football League that season. His son looked at him and said, "You?" Well, dads do surprise us. And as I say, the older we grow, we're really surprised about how smart they become, right? You know? But there is no surprisiness now about Abba, Daddy, the one Daddy we all share. May we so love this Daddy as Jesus loved him, that in someday in our futures, we will hear that voice brimming with feeling. I have been waiting for you so long. I have the room all ready for you. Welcome home.